Hi, boys and girls. I am back. I have my turkey clips still in. And today you're going to listen to a story titled The Pilgrim's First Thanksgiving. So the book from yesterday, this is kind of an overview. It's a very short story. It doesn't offer a lot of details about the first Thanksgiving. It gives some details. This book definitely offers more details. So we're going to spread it out over 2 days and possibly even 3. So the first Thanksgiving. Turn your listening ears on. All right. A long time ago, some men and women, boys and girls, 2 dogs, and a cat sailed on a ship across the sea. So this is interesting. So the other book said that there were 0 cats. This book says that there's 1 cat. So I wonder which one is true. They left their old country because they could not pray the way they wanted. They couldn't go to the church that they wanted to and worship the way that they wanted. So the people were called the Pilgrims, and the ship was called the Mayflower. So there it is. Say Mayflower. Say Pilgrims. Good. All right. So they are in England. Say England. Good job. The Mayflower was as big as 2 trucks, but it was not big enough. The Pilgrims and sailors crowded together to sleep. They crowded together to eat. The children had no room to run around. They had no toys. They had to leave most things behind. So it definitely was not a fun voyage, not a fun trip. The Pilgrim children hated the food on the ship, but they had to eat it. There was nothing else. Nothing but the same old salted beef or fish. Nothing but the hard, dry biscuits. A little bite of cheese, a little bit of butter. After a while, the food turned bad. There was not enough water for drinking or washing. It was pretty yucky, and I bet it smelled really, really badly aboard the ship. The children couldn't sleep in their warm, cozy beds. They slept on the hard, cold floor of the ship. They slept in the same clothes they wore every day. Their clothes got torn and dirty and smelly. Day by day, things got worse. Storms came. The wind blew hard. The waves tossed the ship about. The Mayflower rolled and creaked in the stormy sea. The rain soaked the ship. The rain poured on the Pilgrims. They were cold and wet. Many of the Pilgrims got sick. Would this terrible voyage ever end? They prayed for the day when they would see land. It was a very, very long trip. They had sailed away in warm September. Now it was cold November. They had been on the Mayflower for 2 whole months. That's like all of October and all of November. It's a really long time. And 3 days. So it was 2 months and 3 days. The next day, finally, they saw land. They were very happy, but they were scared too. What kind of land was this? There were no houses, no stores, no people to meet them. Only an empty white sandy beach with trees and bushes behind it. Oh, but it was so good to be on land again. The Pilgrim children ran up and down the beach, feeling the sand and the land beneath their feet. So they landed in a place called Plymouth, Massachusetts. Not far from here at all. Now it's winter. Winter was coming. The Pilgrims had to find a safe place for all of them to live. Every day a group of Pilgrims searched the wild countryside. At last they came to a place with running brooks and rivers and good land for planting. It was a good place to build their town. They named it Plymouth. They wanted a street to go from the shore to the top of the hill. They wanted a fort on the top of the hill. They wanted houses on both sides of the street. They would have to make everything themselves. It would take a long, long time to finish building Plymouth. In the meantime, they would have to sleep on the Mayflower. I don't know if you remember, I said that yesterday. So at first, they did not have a place to stay. So while they were building their homes, they had to stay on the Mayflower. The first winter in Plymouth, oh, how terrible it was. It was terrible for the Pilgrims. They could not finish building their homes before the snow fell. They could not find enough food in the forests. The Pilgrims worked as hard as they could, but they were hungry and cold and weak. That winter, many of the Pilgrims got sick, and many of them died. Now it is spring. At last the snow begins to melt. Spring was coming. There was so much work to be done. The Pilgrims worked every day but Sunday. Sunday was the time to think about God. They prayed and sang and listened to long sermons. Every day but Sunday, the Pilgrims worked very, very hard. So they had homes to build. They had lots to do. They worked making houses. They made their houses from bark and branches. They made the roofs from straw and vine. Each house had only one room and a small space upstairs. The house got cold when the wind blew in through the holes in the wall. The house got wet when the rain dripped down through the holes in the roof. The only heat came from the fire in the fireplace. Sometimes sparks flew up the chimney and set the straw roof on fire. Then everybody ran outside to put the fire out. So it was definitely not safe at all. But that's how they had to live back then. It was very difficult times. All right, so now we have something inside the home. It looks a little bit more traditional. There are beds. There's a fire pit for cooking. There's a big, big, big pot right there. And then there's a table. So there are some things that we're used to as part of our modern day conveniences. And they had plates for eating. The Pilgrims worked making furniture for their houses. They didn't make much, just some stools and benches and beds. To save space, the children's beds were pushed under the big bed during the day. So this is going to scoot right underneath so they have more room for moving around, which is pretty clever. People used the benches for tables or put their plates on their knees. There were no glasses, so the Pilgrims drank out of mugs made of leather or wood. Their plates and bowls were wooden too. There were no forks. The Pilgrims used shells for spoons. That's a great idea. The only iron things in the house were the iron pots and pans. The big iron pot was used for boiling the stew or making the candles or making the soap. Because remember, boys and girls, they did not have electricity like we do today, where we just turn on a light switch and a light comes on. There was no electricity. There was no warm water. There was no place to go to the bathroom inside the house. Because there was no plumbing. So the toilets were outside. In an outhouse you would go, which is basically like a hole in the ground. So it wasn't like what we're used to today, but this is all they knew. This is the life that they're used to living, but it was a very, very hard and difficult life. All right, so I'm going to read one more page. The only iron things in the house were the iron pots and pans. One big iron pot was used for boiling the stew. I know I already said that. Or making the candles. So the candles were so that they could see. Or making the soap. They had to make their own soap for washing as well, for cleaning the clothes and cleaning themselves. The Pilgrims worked planting their gardens. Each family planted a small garden with seeds brought over on the Mayflower. So they did take some essentials with them, one of which was seeds. They took some tools, seeds. Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to stop right there. That was a lot of information. And I'm going to continue with the story tomorrow. But I'm wondering if you can name at least one fact from the story, something that you learned from the story about the Pilgrims. So far, we've learned about what their life was like when they were on the Mayflower and when they arrived in a place what they later called Plymouth. So what is one fact, one piece of information that you can tell me about what I just read? Okay, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, boys and girls.